Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on Gaia today. Thank you for being here with myself and my lovely facilitator, colleague, and close friend, Candace Craw-Goldman, founder and creator of Beyond Quantum Healing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Pamela. An honor to be with you today, as always.
As always, love working with you. The reason why I created this class is because when I started channeling Dolores and when I met Candace, we had so much work to do together and it just started rolling out all the time. But we were rolling out so much together that I felt like we were, bowling or something. And, I needed to play a few more games. So here we are again. And I'm really, really excited, and hoping this time Quantum Alchemy, we can spin up a strike or something, knock down all the pins. It's a very powerful process. And I'm excited to share some of the basics with you. The reason why I'm offering this course, unlike the course that I offered just a few days ago with Emotional Alchemy 101, which was more of a healing and integration for core beliefs, this is that, but this is that times 1,000. This is a little bit like QHHT, a little bit like Beyond Quantum Healing, especially in the water transmutation, breathing techniques, etc. But it is a lot more like ancient alchemy and shamanism. So I had a lot of questions about when am I going to begin to offer this process, and I thought it would be best to just pull you all here together with Candace and have Candace ask me questions about the process. We can ask Dolores or Master Emoto questions about the process. They've been here all day. I am really, really ill today. I know you can't see that about me, but I am. So if I start struggling with some coughing and breathing, I apologize in advance. But channeling is actually a lot easier for me when I'm ill. Strangely enough, it comes like much more clearly. So that's really weird, but that's why I look a little pale. So just pardon me if anything comes up where I need to drink a lot of water or something, because I'm struggling a little. But I just could not reschedule this class. This class is my heart. And I know that so many people have been waiting for upwards of a year and a half now for me to talk about this process. The reason why I'm giving it to you is because when you know the basics, you can make a decision as a potential facilitator and practitioner of my process. You can make a better decision whether or not to add that to your tool belt as a practitioner. Is not something that you want to go through as a client and do it on yourself because it is a shamanic process. However, some of the techniques in it will help you and a facilitator. Even though it is a trademark process, there's many things in the process that's standard in shamanism and regression around the world. And I do not get so picky and closed about my process that I say, hey, don't include that in your own work. Please include that in your own work. These processes, whether it be mine or Candace's or Dolores, they've been around and they're older than the sun, okay? So for any of us to say, I own this, would also be a bit false, universally speaking, because some of them are even older than this universe. So if it works in your process, by all means, please take it and use it for yourselves and your clients in any way that you can. I'm not stingy. Please, however, if you do use it, any of the trademark portions, particularly the 2 inductions that we're going to talk about today, if you use that or anything that's particular to the QA process itself, please try to make sure that you give credit where credit is due, as you would any other practitioner whose process you are using in your own. Okay, now we can get started. Candace, feel free to interrupt me with your questions. Do you have one straight out the gate?
I don't. I just really do feel Dolores, though. That's all I want to say. And I had an event get together earlier in preparation for World Regression Week that's coming up, and she and Emoto were both in there too. So I think there's a lot of buildup today. I'm very excited about this. I know how powerful this quantum alchemy is because you've introduced it to me and I've experienced it from you. I'm excited about everybody who's here, and I'm excited to learn even more along with all of you out there. So thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here and being willing to be open and learn about a brand new process. It's a combination of so many types of work that I don't want to overwhelm you, but it is a powerful process and you're going to have to listen closely in order to catch on to it, because some of this is deep alchemy. One of you asked a question about it in terms of if you want to become a practitioner with me, if you want to be certified, how to do it. How you would do that would be to go to PamelaAaralyn.com and just sign up for any mentorship package, but preferably just the basic one, just the basic. Don't go out into the whole Way of Mastery 10-month long thing. It doesn't take 10 months to learn alchemy at the very basic level. Normally we can do that from anywhere from 3 to 4 sessions of it. Many of you have asked what is involved in the QA sessions. In training, it involves me teaching you the process and answering your questions about the basics of the interview and inductions, water transmutation technique, breathing and grounding technique, and resistance process, which is also a part of it. We're not going to talk much about the resistance process today because it is an 11-step process that I've already taught you in preparation for this course in Emotional Alchemy 101, right there on your Patreon just a few days ago. So at any point in time, you notice I say, and now if the client is not being induced, go to the 11 steps of the resistance process. That's what you do. That is the resistance process. I've broken it down into 11 questions to get through egoic resistance of the mind. And when you're working in beta and you can't really get someone out of beta, it's really, really difficult for inductions. And I created an 11-step process in my class here, again, called Emotional Alchemy 101. So when I say go to resistance process, that's what I'm talking about. In terms of that, we go through the first time with me, which takes about 40 minutes to an hour. We talk about the interview process, what I expect from you as a practitioner, and what would be the ideal client. We talk about all those things, and we go through terms and terminologies and all the words that you need to understand in regards to alchemy, which are hundreds. We talk about all of that in the first 40 minutes to 60 minutes of a session when you are being certified. In the next session with me, we sit down and we teach you the 2 basic inductions, which are simple and easy. One is called the Sacred Shape Induction. Another one is called the Tunnel Induction. So depending upon how your client is feeling, the Sacred Shape Induction is utilized for keeping them safe emotionally. Emotional safety and trust between client and facilitator is of utmost importance in this process. So I'm going to teach you those 2 inductions today. And then we work through that, and I will ask you in the second session with me to show me how you're going to regress someone. So you will either show up with someone who is willing to do a mock regression with you, and if you have no one, you will induce me. Don't worry, I'm really easy. And then we're going to go through that and discuss how you did and what you could do better. Then I'm going to ask you to do it again. I'm going to induce you so that you understand what it feels like as a client, and you're going to induce me or bring another person one more time. In order to speed up the process, you can get through this by doing it yourself, recording it and emailing it to me, and we will also discuss it in your next certification session with me if you do it that way. So there are 2 different ways to practice inducing people, with me or without me, or bringing a practice person to a mock session during your certification times with me. So those are the ways. Many people have asked me how come it's not structured like QHHT or Beyond Quantum Healing, where you can do things online, because alchemy and shamanism is unique to the shaman and alchemist. So for the people that I will be training to teach you other than me, right now I have 2 in mind, those 2 are really adept at working with either hypnosis and regression processes, and or they're working as a shaman somehow or another. So that would be something that as a practitioner, if you have any sort of hypnosis background, shamanism background, deep emotional inner child work, if you have any alchemy background, then you are perfect for this type of process in terms of being a practitioner. Do we have any questions so far?
Yeah, along those lines, how do I know if I'm prepared to start a quantum healing certification? I think she means, this is from, I think, Jimena.
Yeah.
I think she means Quantum Alchemy.
Yeah.
So do you have to have some of that background that you just mentioned to even begin this? I mean, what's your suggestion there?
You don't have to, but keep in mind when you're working with a facilitator who's teaching you, when you're working with someone who's certifying you, and that person is a shaman, you are also being taught both shamanism and alchemy simultaneously. So what that means is you need to come to my certification classes relatively emotionally stable. If you're on any psychiatric medications, if you have addictions to alcohol or drugs that you're working through, if you're getting off of psychiatric medications, you are not optimal as either a client or a practitioner to begin this kind of journey, because we need you at a stable space where you can become emotionally and energetically vulnerable, trusting yourself as a practitioner, or if you're a client and you want to come to me and be regressed. Right now, I'm the only person who is certified to regress in this, because that's how dear this process is to me. But I'm in the process of training 2 other people, potentially 3 once I get the first 2 trained. So we will have other people that can work with you. However, keep in mind that if you're really feeling like you're having any symptoms of psychosis, if you have alcoholism and it's out of control, if you have any of those things that cause for deeper emotional instabilities, you're definitely not optimal as a practitioner. You'll need to work that through first and find a sense of stability, because again, this is shamanism and alchemy, and you're working with people's lives. And one of my guides is standing behind me going, no pressure, no pressure. And I'm like, yeah, it absolutely is pressure. Because you have to be confident that you're stable enough to work with people's emotions, particularly as a practitioner. If you're coming to me and you want to be regressed as a client, I can work with you, but not if you're on psychiatric medications, not if you're experiencing current psychosis, and not if you're drinking or on drugs. I just can't. I won't get anywhere. Your ego won't let me induce you. What's your take on all those things? Do you experience that in BQH as well?
Oh, absolutely. All across the board, all the way down. Yes, same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So just find a sense of stability, because I know it's so hard for me as a practitioner when people come to me and they're like, I really want some healing, and we go through QA and they're not stable. There's been some interesting work that's come out of psychosis, but keep in mind that legally speaking, it puts your practitioner in a real bind. Because legally speaking, we don't have the allopathic qualifications involved in the medical community. And if anything happened to your mental stability, we could easily get sued. So I don't like being in that position. So that's the only reason why I put out these disclaimers. I think that's enough. Insofar as if you know you're ready, basically it is a powerful and advanced alchemy process. It's not a matter of have you done BQH or QHHT or shamanism before. It's a matter of, can you trust yourself and trust me as the person certifying you that you're going to really learn this process and commit to it. It's a commitment. It's a commitment. So someone said, does it need to be done online or in person? That's not my concern. A really good practitioner and who's certifying you can do it both online or in person. I prefer to do it online because it just really helps a lot more people that way. And obviously, I would not be giving you the process if I didn't think that you could do it online as a practitioner as well, or as a client. It can be done in any of those ways. You'd like to be regressed for the first time. Well, go big or go home. A shamanic alchemical regression for a first timer. I'd say just try to be hypnotized for the first time and see where that gets you. If you know that you cannot be hypnotized, yeah, come to QA, because QA is one of those practices where I certify my practitioners to be darn good at knowing how to hypnotize you, because it's a problem all across the board that either you can't talk to your higher self. It's okay if you don't go, deep into theta, alpha, or deeper places. That's okay for you not to reach those places. That's not my concern. And there's been so many misperceptions about hypnosis that you have to be going into some space of, the hypnagogic spaces where your higher self is coming through and telling you all these things. Your higher self can come through even if you are in beta. Your higher self can come through completely. It's not about that. It's a matter of, are you working with your breath, and are you keeping your thoughts out of the way? That's the depth of the process. Okay, I'm ready to start talking a little bit more about it. One of you asked a good question in terms of why I created it and what level you have to be. It's for all levels. This is level 1. I currently have 3 levels and 15 inductions. 15. So for level 1, you get taught 2. For level 2, you can come back and you will be taught 5 more. And for level 3, you come back and you are taught 7 more inductions to make sure that no matter what type of client you're working with, that you can induce them successfully. And today we're only going to talk about the first 2. One of you asked me last week, sitting before me as a student, what was my main reason to create an alchemy process? And I would say that it's because I noticed this incessant need that humans have for processes and they wanted mine. So I noticed primarily that right now, a lot of the human conscious collective seems to operate from a space of lack, where they don't feel any individual sense of purpose on Earth. And the primary goal of quantum alchemy is to get to your purpose, understand your contracts, and to become more aligned in your processes in your contracts and your learning in your contracts. So even in psychology, a lot of psychologists and doctors will admit and work together to tell us that lack of purpose is one of the primary reasons for depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of that's lack-based, and it comes from patternings of the brain, and the brain actually is programmed from the past. Everything about the way that most people make their decisions has to do with the brain synapsing on fear, lack, abandonment, powerlessness, and trying to protect you from all of that. Quantum alchemy brings you into that belief system. We track it back to where it goes, whether it's this lifetime or another lifetime. We try to find out where disease comes from and why it's there and what beliefs created it. And it works because it's flexible and it gives you kind of a, you're not jumping straight into the dark or into the light. You're finding a middle path between both. So my definition of alchemy, when you ask me what that is and why it's involved in this process, I like to find combinations of elements. You're going to be working with elements. Notice there's a lot of breath. Notice there's a lot of water. Notice we work with light and dark and sound. When you say I am, that is a sound element that connects you with one of the primary elements I love that is called ether. When you're working with ether, you and the client go into the Akash. Now I'm going to say that again. It's not just the client going through the Akash. You are suddenly becoming a shamanic guide to bring that person through their Akash safely, and you're with a team of ancestors and what I call the guardian in this process. So when you do this, you can transmute and change things and empower your client at the cellular level of their being, reconnecting them to their original purpose in their contracts as opposed to whatever is happening on the conscious level that's blocking them, okay? Whether that be physical or emotional, whatever that may be. Do we have questions so far about what this is and why I'm doing it?
There's a good question in the question queue asking though about self-healing. You know, a lot of healers, myself included, got into this to try to take care of ourselves first. And so Susan asks, as alchemists, is it common for self-healing to feel more difficult than our work to assist the transformation of others? I think it's an interesting question.
I wonder do you think that because I'm confused about that question, because my brain went, you know, is she going to ask, is this process, can this process be used for self-healing? Yes and no. But then when I listened to you further, it sounded like she might be asking, are we going to have a harder time as shamans and alchemists than our clients?
It's a really great question, because it could be thought of in about 3 different ways that I could think of. I kind of like the way she asked it. I just wanted to see how you were going to answer.
I can answer it in so many different ways. Is this process used for self-healing? Traditionally speaking, no. But from the client's perspective, yes, you are likely coming for healing. From the practitioner's perspective, you are coming to tether yourself to your client and journey through Akashic realms with your client. So their ancestors, their guardians, you're connecting to their guardians and ancestors, merging with their guardians and ancestors, speaking on behalf of their guardians and ancestors, and then encouraging them to let the higher self through. And with the help of the guardians and ancestors that we invite into the process, and you tethering yourself to them, you are going to naturally really feel good. But when you're going through spaces where the client feels bad, you may feel that as well. You may find that that sacred shape induction technique will be used around you and the client. So empaths, you're really going to have to contain yourself doing this. It's hard work, and you have to be unafraid to experience difficult, traumatic emotions. Does that answer your question?
I think it's a good answer to that question. I see another one over in the chat scrolling. Somebody asks if the quality of the practitioner is important in the session. And, you know, that could be answered on several different levels as well. What quality what quality we're talking about there. But I thought that was a good question to ask you as well, Pamela.
Mental stability and confidence of the practitioner is going to come into play. And for most of my students watching here are current mentorship students right now, going through any sort of mentorship with me. I'm easy to work with. I provide that confidence because it's the ancestors and the guardians doing the work, not the client, not you. The ancestors and the guardians will reduce the blocks for you, whether it's confidence, lack of confidence in yourself, or whatever it is, and practice, 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 practice. You don't have to be confident right away. You know, if we get through the first 3 sessions of certification and you're still not feeling confident, add another session and we'll keep working on it until you do. Practice with more clients and shoot me an example of it. You know, send me an email asking, you know, what the problem is, and we'll work on it in our next session together. You have so many techniques. You're working with prana, you're working with light and sound, you're working with breath, you're working with water, you have grounding techniques, you have an 11-step resistance process. You have so much to get through in terms of what's expected of you. However, you can also trust your own intuitive guidance as a practitioner. If you are already a shaman, if you are already practicing BQH and doing just fine, you may find that another induction works better than the tunnel induction. You may find a different type of point of safety than the sacred shape induction. You may find something completely different. You know what I mean? Okay.
A lot of people asking a lot of Dolores questions.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I think they want to know how much she's involved here, maybe how much her, human work is involved, how much her spirit has provided input. I don't know, a lot of interest in Dolores, and she's going to talk later. But
in the inductions, she was involved a lot in all of my inductions, particularly the sacred shape and tunnel induction. She likes the work that we're doing with breath, so that's really good. So with the sacred shape induction process, the questions that are involved in it and how you place yourself and the client in the center of the sacred shape and place it around you, that's something that she suggested. And she really likes the pyramid or the triangle. So for those of you who don't know what sacred shape to use as a practitioner, she loves the pyramid. And that's something that came from her in her time, both alive and, well, I don't want to say that other word, but in spirit. So that came from both of those time periods. So she works particularly with the pyramid in the sacred shape induction, with counting backwards with breath, slowing your breath down, using a very slow counting technique where your breath is of a high frequency and your voice is of high frequency as a practitioner, and then lowering it and slowing it and lowering it and slowing it and lowering it and slowing it when you count backwards. That's something that she enjoys. Her power of observation in terms of the questions that she asks in all inductions, the questions were taken from her. So I am not qualified or certified in QHHT, so I can't tell you if those questions are a part of QHHT or not. I don't know. I've never done QHHT. But she tells me that a lot of the way that she questions, particularly when going through the tunnel induction, when you start to ask what is the most relevant record, what does the higher self want to say? What would be most important now? These are questions that came from her. The guiding into the senses. What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What do you innately know? What is happening now? What is the hardest feeling in this moment? What would the higher self like us to know right now? These are all questions in all of the inductions that are from her particularly.
Dolores felt that by activating all of those senses, what are you seeing, hearing, feeling, really allows the client to kind of leave the conscious mind and the physical body inert in the place of rest while they are experiencing this quantum alchemy shamanic journey, or this, this other way of being, this other focus to experience the healing.
Yeah. So all of the way that she questions the higher self and gives it permission to take over, that is in every single induction that I have, all 15. So you can expect the foundation of this process to be fully guided by her. There's a lot of breath work in between. And she liked whenever she noticed that I'm going through my process and a person pops up out of hypnosis. She gives me the metaphor as sort of like popping up out of water when they're in the ocean and then they come up for air and they feel a little bit too repressed and unsafe down there. We do the induction again, but in a different way. We don't go back through the tunnel. We don't use our breath and count backwards. We put a sacred shape, normally a pyramid, around the client, and we do other things to get through again. And if that doesn't work, then we go to my resistance process where we ask 11 different questions to get them out of their head. So basically what we're doing is working the client through fear every single time they come out of hypnosis or every single time they come out of a regressed state. Do you guys understand what I mean? Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, hold on, I want to find something. I want to tell you a little bit about the sacred shape induction because it's so important to her. What she often would say and ask a practitioner to tell her the client to do would be to envision, we'll start out with the pyramid, and if that doesn't work, then they get to choose the shape. It's interesting because she started out the other way around saying, let them choose the sacred shape. And of course, it didn't work because they would say, I don't know what shape is right. So what we're doing now, since we went through all the beta with this, is we go straight into the pyramid and we ask the client in the sacred shape induction, which is one of the first things you do once they get out of an interview and find out what they need to know and what you need to know. You're going to place a pyramid. You're going to ask them to envision a pyramid around them, for them to draw it on the ground around them, not literally, but when they're closing their eyes and breathing for them to envision that. So you would ask them to envision the pyramid that surrounds them. And then you would ask them to call upon the version of their higher self who is experiencing the pain. So you would also let them know that the sacred shape is for safety and for emotional and physical safety, so that they can feel free to observe their memories without re-experiencing them in their reality now or in the future. So that's something that when you as a practitioner would say that to your client, you let them know that, so that that seeps into the subconscious before they are induced. So when you put that in there, it's a very safe program. She's all about trust and emotional safety right now in this work.
So for those who are not qualified in QHHT, the induction contains an element of putting a pyramid around the client so that they feel safe. So that's just for the benefit of those who have not been trained in that method. So this is an extension of that.
It is an extension of that, yes. So she wanted to put in enough familiarity, but then to kind of pipe it up a notch. So once we do that, then the practitioner would ask their client to call in a guardian. And they're going to ask you what that is. So you will let them know it's any person, living or deceased, any spirit guide, angelic presence, deity, animal around them right now. Ask them if they could have anyone right here, right now with them. Who would they choose? And then you invite that guardian into the sacred shape. That is the third thing you do in that induction. They come in with you, with the client, okay? You and client and guardian are now inside of the sacred shape together. So this does something different alchemically and shamanically speaking when three are inside of a 3-point sacred shape. Do you see what I'm doing here, alchemists? There's a reason for that induction. So past, present, future, body, mind, spirit, everything is safe in threes. In alchemy, we do everything in threes. Every single time we say an I am invocation in this process, which is often, by the way, we do it 3 times. There's a reason for that. Do we have any questions so far? No? Okay. Once you invite the guardian in with you and the client in the sacred shape, you continue the process by asking them, what do you remember? Remember your most recent time that you felt this way. You can also say, when is the last time you felt, and then in the blank, put the negative core belief or the pain or the fear that they're experiencing. So that's a part of the first induction as well, is that you are identifying the belief, the physical disease, or the emotional pain that they're experiencing at that time, whatever fear is involved, any of that you will identify in the interview process. This comes up now. So what is the most recent thing? Pull that in. And then, when was the first time that you can remember feeling this way? Now, this is incredibly relevant because normally most clients will go back to childhood. You'll have some very deeply wounded clients that go back into a past lifetime. But what we notice so far in beta is that people go into their childhood. And that's a really good thing, because that means that whatever is carrying over from past lifetimes is here now, and you can work on it now. You will get a lot more results that way, in this process at least. Then you want to ask your client to observe that memory safely right inside of the sacred shape. So then you're going to say, what do you see now? What do you feel is relevant now? What is happening? Where is this feeling in the body? What is the hardest thing about this moment? What are you learning in this moment? What is relevant in this moment? So these are a series of questions that are a part of them. And I'm giving you just the basic 5. That's basic for QA 1.
So can we repeat that again? Because I couldn't even write them down fast enough. What do you see? What is relevant?
What are you feeling? What are you hearing? What do you know innately? How are you feeling? What is happening now? What is the hardest feeling in this moment? And what is relevant to know now? Your client will get a lot of questions for you in this, because this is a way to invite the as Dolores used to call it, the subconscious. Now she calls it the higher self or the self. The self will come through, and basically start speaking on behalf of the client. Because of the triad in the sacred shape, it automatically pulls through into the higher self. So you are then identifying, again, from a higher self perspective, what the lower self believes would be the negative core belief, or the pain physically or emotionally. You're identifying it again. And the more you identify it from higher self perspective, the more you will understand the reason why it happened, the reason why it's there, and if it is still relevant to that person's record and experience now or not. So this is why we do all those things. If for any reason the client goes into some resistance, gets a little bit too much in their head, is not answering, you're going to go back to Emotional Alchemy 101, which we've called the resistance process, which is highly identified in your certification. We go through that until you can identify the original core belief or negative feeling or pain again. The whole point of this journey is to continue to identify what's bothering your client in the now. And if they're going back into a past lifetime in any induction, to connect it to a point in time where they feel that way right now. So we're going to be asking those questions. When is the last time you felt that way recently? When is the first time you felt that way? And what is relevant about this feeling now? You will notice these questions all over my process in inductions. We are tying the past to the present so that we can understand why the client is still in this contract and find out if it's still relevant. Any questions so far?
Here's a good one. Does the client have to do these things in their head? She says, Natalia is asking, or are they saying it out loud? She's wanting to know how this is working.
All of this is out loud. You are the practitioner, not the client. So everything that I'm teaching you today is from the point of the practitioner's perspective. And these are what you're asking. These are questions you're asking your client. You're inducing a client. So the client, basically, they're going to be responding to you out loud. If they respond in their head, unless they're telepathic, unless the practitioner is telepathic, you're not going to get very far. So yes, they need to respond to you out loud. Absolutely.
Yeah, what this kind of sounds like, and I by the way, for all of you out there who are watching this, I am learning this too. I absolutely, I am a student here. I showed up to Pamela's to learn this last year, but we only just started. Well, anyway, so we pretty much just started it. But it looks like from the outside, if you were watching this process, it looks like a conversation.
It is a conversation.
Between the practitioner and the client, back and forth, questions back and forth. And with the response that the client gives the practitioner, there's kind of a flow chart and outline that then the practitioner knows how to then respond back to the client. But it is very much a back and forth conversation, and the client isn't laying down, as far as I know. When I did it with you, we were just sitting up talking, and that may answer Amy's question. How's it different? I'm still learning, even though you would imagine I could answer that question. How's it different? I'll tell you later. That's kind of what I want to say. There's a lot of similarities here. There's some similarities here with QHHT. There's similarities, but Pamela knows what she's doing here, and we're all just learning. And so please continue on.
Yeah, so basically these are the questions you're going to be asking your client once they're induced in the sacred shape induction. So once they begin to answer all these feelings, their higher self will step in. You will notice and feel a difference in them. It's just something you notice. It's hard for me to explain to you without going deeply into certification class and going through the whole thing. So we're starting out with these basic inductions so that you understand that when you get deeper as a practitioner with me, we have a lot of material, like 30 pages of material about how to know when a client is induced and how you can tell. So don't worry about that just right now. Just know that if the client pops out of their regression, that you can go back to the resistance process and that you will have a flow chart with every single step of this. Okay, that's there for you. At some point in this, once they start talking, the next step in the sacred shape induction is for you to identify the negative core belief, feeling, or pain once more. Just observe it as a practitioner and ask your client to observe. And you may notice some things happen because the higher self is taking over, that this emotion, this belief begins to shift. It may, if it shifts into a negative belief, go backward into the resistance process. If it shifts into a positive feeling or belief and they feel like they're better and their higher self is telling you that they no longer need this and that they're healing it now, we go to a completely different stage of the process called Am Invocations, which a lot of you have been following my work for a while, you will recognize those terms. So then you continue with your sacred shape induction, and you'll follow your script further at that point with sort of a line of meditation-based questions, and this pulls them deeper. You as a practitioner are now going to speak on behalf of their guardian. So you will let them know that by saying, I am now speaking on behalf of your guardian, and you will list that guardian's name. And remember, they told you that at the beginning of the induction. I am now speaking on behalf of your guardian. You have every right to feel this way. I am completely here with you right now. You guys recognizing this? I stopped because I wanted to see if you recognize that technique as a part of my compassionate presence response, or as a part of my presence technique. So it's listed in both of those former techniques from Aura Alchemy, and it made its way here. Raise your hand if you remember. You don't get extra points for everything, but I'm curious if you guys who followed the class last week are finally kind of seeing a connection between all of my processes here. So you have every right to feel this way. We validate how terrible it is to feel this way, and you could change that word, like how we validate how you feel, put in the blank, list their core belief again. And then you ask them, how would you prefer this memory occur from this point forward? Wait on their answer. And then, what would you like to happen now? Wait on their answer. Sometimes the client will say, I don't know, or they may say, I would prefer for this negative event that, that they share with you not to happen at all. They can't do that. So that doesn't work in alchemy. So if that occurs, just remind them gently by letting them know that while we can't change the past, we can work with the present and the future. So you'll let them know that they are observing this moment, this memory, in order to learn from it, not to change it, but to learn from it and to find out what was relevant only. If they pop out of the situation, again, refer to the resistance process, or what you know of as Emotional Alchemy 101. That's how it was taught on Patreon. Once your client decides how they want the memory to go forward positively, you simply allow for them to create the change. This is very deeply, this is the alchemy part of it. You will allow for that by asking their guardian and higher self to do it. So this is what you say. Now that you have decided what will happen from this point forward, visualize it as if it is happening right now. You have your safe guardian by your side. So we put that in the process, but you can list the name of the guardian, actually. You have blank by your side. Mary shows up recently for a lot of you. Your ancestors now give you full permission to change this timeline in a way that is positive, healing, and relevant to your life now. That is a very important thing to say that does most of the magic for you. At this point, if you feel guided and shamanic, you have the choice to call forth what I call the client's circle of ancestors. You can, if you choose, invite the ancestors of the client to stand in a sacred circle of light around their sacred shape. So this is their sacred shape. circle of light around it. Y'all recognize this new sacred geometry with the circle and triangle inside? Ultimately speaking, in all parts of quantum alchemy, we use so many sacred shapes, but this is the basic one that keeps everyone safe. Now you have the circle and the triangle, okay? Triangle inside, everyone's in here, circles out here. Ancestors, you can invite them to stand around the perimeter of the sacred circle. It's very powerful when a client knows their entire circle of ancestors is around them. So you're going to take a moment and ask the client to visualize the sacred circle, to call in their ancestors one by one, and to stand on the perimeter of the sacred circle around the pyramid, okay? Then you ask again to speak on behalf of their guardian, which sounds like this. I once again speak with permission on behalf of your guardian. If there is anything you'd rather feel instead of, now in the blank, you put the negative core belief, the negative emotional problem, or the physical pain, whatever it is you're working with, instead of, fill in the blank, what would you choose to feel instead? Now, here's the hard part. Clients like to come in and say something really blasé that isn't really emotion, like freedom, or peace, or happiness, or healed. From the ancestors' higher self perspective, you are already all of those things. And those are thoughts. That's your ego trying to creep back in. So what you're trying to do is recognize as a practitioner how the ego creeps back in and what it says that you as a practitioner will be well trained to recognize when it's doing that. So this is the fun part. You're going to go back into the resistance process because 80% of regressed clients do this. They say some boring thing like freedom and they're already free. They say something like peace and they're God. So they are innately peace. So you want to go deeper. All right. So you'll wait. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was. I wanted to reach back to Susan Smarty asks, does it have to be done through an induction? She wants to know. But I mean, this is the process, right? The process.
This is the process. Yeah. People ask for a regression process. So in this process, it is, what is your definition of induction? I've induced people with eyes wide open. You know, there's a lot of flexibility. If you as a practitioner are confident that your client is fully induced with their eyes wide open, you go with your badass, you know. But quite frankly, I noticed that a lot of clients are still in resistance and regression. So I have created this process as more of a really tight, specific, do this, do that, foolproof way of keeping your clients induced. Because that's what I was hearing in QHHT for years and years and years. And Dolores was like, oh, they're out again. We got to do something different. Oh, they're out again. We got to do something different. So she wants them induced. So I'm keeping them induced. You know, insofar as other ways to work with it, if you have a really advanced client who's an avid meditator and probably a monk or a yogi or something, this may not be relevant to the situation. And if you're finding that you're getting really good answers from them, then go for it. But I like to induce them first just to make sure that we're getting higher self answers. Let's see, we've done that. We've spoken on behalf of the client, and then you're going to wait on the client to identify their new positive core belief that is actually an emotion, and make sure that it's not a thought. Make sure that the belief is a positive emotion, not an action, not something that's just a thought, not something from ego. So if a client goes into a thought-based core belief, another thing you can ask them very quickly is, how would you feel if this were true right now? So say, for example, I'm going to give you a egoic response that's just a thought. Well, I just want to feel happy. Okay, you're happy right now. All of this never happened. How would you feel if that were true? All they're going to say is happy again or free or some other same thing. Now, another thing you can say is, if you could choose any color to represent this feeling, what would you choose? If they get weird about it and they don't know what to choose, remind them that there is no wrong answer. The color that they choose is going to help you know if they are really getting through the work or not. because when a client comes through and you know that they are still in depth, but they choose some pink happy color, I'm like, yeah, you're not really going deep with me. You'll know if a client chooses gold or like clear or crystal that they're not going deep, because negative beliefs tend to be a little ruddy and dark. Positive beliefs, if they're there, they're going to show up when you ask that question as clear, bright colors, not anything ruddy. So the color of the depth of the color and the clarity of the color is going to tell you where your client is in their process at this point. So you can then ask, what color does the belief feel like? What color comes into your mind? If it had a sound, what would it be like? If it tasted like something in your mouth, what would it taste like? Now this gets incredibly shamanic. We had musicians that go full out and start singing at this point. Let them. They want to sing a note. They want to chant their belief that they'd rather feel instead. Please let them. And if they go into anything negative, you're going to repeat the process. Or if you feel guided, go towards the tunnel induction, which is a completely different technique. Okay. Remember that this sacred shape induction is something that can be used repeatedly as needed. You're doing this to establish safety and trust, especially during past lifetime trauma or early lifetime trauma, like in this lifetime, like childhood trauma. Okay. Here are some of the questions again that you can ask in this. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you innately know? What do you smell? What is instinctively known about your environment? There's so many different ways that you can ask. What is relevant about this is the question that you always end with in your line of questionings in this process. So again, you're simply allowing your client to bring forth relevant information, guiding them as necessary by repeating, what do you sense now? So scenes are going to come up. And if a scene comes up in general, you may ask, what is relevant in your present life about this scene? How would you feel if that were true now? How are you feeling? And does this connect to how you feel now? All of these questions, notice that my process is laden with inquiry because most of my guides are yogis and they believe in self-inquiry. Dolores does too. So she put all these questions in because these questions allow your client to connect the dots between all relevant records in their Akash to the records that are still operative now. Okay? Any questions so far?
I've got one from Natalie asks, what if you're an empath? Maybe she's asking, what if you're an empath? Can you do this work? Or while you're doing this work and you're an empath, how does that affect what's going on here?
There is a difference between, Dolores likes to joke around with me. She said, your sympathy is eating you alive. So she said, that's the stuff that causes cancers.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, thank you. So basically, she and I created this term called sympathing. And she created it for me because it's something that as a channel who is predominantly empathic, what's that? Oh, thank you. That's predominantly empathic. I tend to do this thing that she calls sympathing, where I feel so much sympathy for the person that I would just start crying. And then, of course, the client will pop out of regression, feel unsafe, blah, blah, blah. So I had to practice myself as a shaman, as a child with this kind of work. Not in this exact process, but as a shaman, as a child, I was initiated by Cherokee Nations. And they would say, if you're going to cry during this, you're just going to go there with them in that pain. And while it's okay to go there with them in the pain, you have to be sure, empathic channels, that you're not taking it over. Okay, this is a really, really hard thing for practitioners. So no sympathing, please. You can feel on behalf of your client, and you can transmute on behalf of them, but you cannot take their pain from them. You're not Kuan Yin. Okay, so if you're really trained,
sympathing. Yeah. I just see a bumper sticker right now. No sympathy.
No sympathing. That's the stuff that causes cancer. Dolores is saying again.
I could just hear her say it.
Yeah, she did. Okay, let me get to some other processes. I would like to teach you a little bit about higher self induction. So within this part of the process, you're going to move into the higher self, and this normally happens after the sacred shape. You're going to go directly into a higher self inquiry portion. You're going to ask your client any of the following questions, and you're then going to observe and pay really close attention to their bodily, verbal, and emotional responses. And you're going to pay attention to the level of soul from which they answer. So you as a practitioner will be highly trained to recognize at this point if they're dipping in and out of, say, upper consciousness and lower consciousness. You know, there's many different realms the client can answer from, okay? So we can get more into that when you're going through your certifications, because that's deeper work. So you start out by asking your client to repeat the following I am induction statement for higher self-access. And that is, you write this down if you want, I invoke the I am in me to access any portion of my higher consciousness for divine truths, relevance, and guidance. Now that's a long one, so I'm going to say this again. You're going to say it, client's going to repeat it. Again, this is a higher self-induction. I invoke the I am in me to access any portion of my higher consciousness for divine truths, relevance, and guidance. Once your client seems calm after that induction statement, remind them to focus on their breath as they answer the following questions directed towards their higher self. So we're going to insert in your client's name and pretend your client's name is Candace right now. And here are the questions that you are now asking the client's higher self. Is there an emotional block on Candace's conscious levels causing her triggers, physical pain, or emotional pain? Now, if you already specifically know what the problem is, like say it's cancer, say it's a spinal injury, you can put that in there. You can get very specific, and then you would say, is there an emotional block on Candace's conscious levels causing this spinal injury, or wherever that is? We take that back from the universe right now. Dolores made me do that. Just so we don't put anything out there. So whenever I say something, I take it back if I don't like the way it sounds. Okay. Would you, Candace's higher self, like to respond and guide us into the reason and relevance for this block? Say that to the induced client, then wait. They will say something. What are the origins of this block? Then wait. They will say something. Is Candace at the higher self level ready to release this block? Wait. If they say yes, can we proceed to release this block now? So if your client answers yes to all of those questions, you can move forward into an I am emotional block removal invocation. Okay. If the client's higher self doesn't respond at all, then you would want to close your eyes as a practitioner. This is where things get very interesting. You close your eyes, focus on your breath, and repeat the following I am higher self induction statement to see if you can tap in to your client's higher self on their behalf. So here we go. This is what the practitioner does. This is what kind of makes this process really special. I invoke the I am in me, Pamela, to access any portion of Candace's higher consciousness for divine truths, relevance, and guidance. Don't worry, Candace, I'm going to take that back here in a second. So once you feel connected, firstly, allow your client to be made aware that you've connected and you're speaking on behalf of their higher self with the following statement. I now speak on behalf of Candace's higher self. You say that. That's all it takes. And then you can ask the same scripted questions that we put before that you asked to the client. You're going to ask, or any that you feel intuitively apply as a practitioner, you're going to do that. And then you're going to be getting in there deeply and then having the answer repeated out loud. So you're going to ask the question out loud, and then you're going to wait and have that answer repeated through your mouth, and then the client is going to listen to you. Okay, I know that's a little different. That's a big switch around from the way you normally do it. But I did this for a reason. This connects you to your client and tethers you energetically together. Good times. This is why I asked you to be stable.
All right. Yeah, I get the stable part, but I can already, even if it hasn't been asked yet, I can already feel a lot of the people out there listening to this might have a response, something like, well, Pamela, I'm not a clear channel like you are. How can I possibly do that? Or I'm not a medium, or I'm not a...
I'm going to correct you on that. Okay. When you are induced in alchemy, and in my original times as an alchemist, everybody has a permission to clearly channel. Absolutely everybody. And remember, you're asking on behalf of someone else's higher self. So you're going to get a feeling. You're either going to see, know, feel, taste, smell, hear something. And then you're going to say out loud, I am sensing this. I hear this. I feel this. I smell this. I taste this in my mouth. I instinctively know that I'm here. You then become a client for the client. It's very fun. So remember, you have to trust that you too have access to anything that I would. And don't be afraid to try exactly Mac. Mac said that in chat. Yeah, so just give it a shot. You will be surprised how easy channeling is. You don't have to be a practice channel to do this. Yeah. I'll stop for a minute to give time for questions to Dolores or Masaru Emoto. Since they've been here the whole time, they don't really have anything to say so far, but they're really open to your questions. So Candace, if you see any, or if anybody has any, now's the time to type them.
I'm looking. Come on, people. What are your Dolores questions? Type them in the question box or even in the chat. Either one.
Okay. All right.
No questions. I can't believe there's so many of you out there. Nobody has a question for Dolores?
Okay. After this, we normally go into the I am transmutation process, which sounds a little bit like this. Okay. Have your client repeat this statement 3 times, inserting the negative core belief. In the pre-I am and then the post-I am statement, you insert a positive core belief. Remember, you've already identified that before. So it sounds a little bit like this. I invoke the I am in me to transmute, say your negative core belief was powerless and your positive one is empowerment, to transmute powerlessness into empowerment, and so it is. I invoke the I am in me to transmute powerlessness into empowerment, and so it is. 3 times. I invoke the I am in me to transmute powerlessness into empowerment, and so it is. I use that as an example because that's like 50% of the core beliefs that come up has to do with powerlessness, I've noticed. Here is another block removal invocation that we will often use in this process. It's very powerful, and you will notice it because I've taught it to you a lot before in other shamanic processes, particularly in the Awakening the Shaman class. I call this, again, the I am emotional block removal invocation. I invoke the I am in me to call back my power from all 4 directions, north, south, east, west. I call back my power from the space of all time infinitum to remove this block now as it no longer serves me. And so it is. Rinse, wash, repeat. That's 3 times. Shamanic shampoo commercial. Okay. All right. I'm going to start looking at, I'm going to close my script now because we are running out of time and I want to have time to really get deeper into your questions and anything that you want to ask Dolores about her work in this, and Masaru Emoto about their work in this. And I'm gonna...
Christina asks about the books of Dolores. What's the most important book? But maybe the way to ask that during this classes, what's the most important book that might relate to quantum alchemy and this process and what you're doing? Would Dolores have a answer to that?
Convoluted Universe number 4.
There you go. Pretty specific.
Yeah. She's so upset with me for not reading it. I still haven't read a single thing.
Here's another Dolores question by Jennifer. She asks that, she says, I heard once that repetitiveness in shamanic work works on a quantum level to change things. Dolores, can you explain a little how this works? Great question, Jennifer.
Because the amygdala in the brain processes this way. So basically speaking, in the amygdala, there are programs that are controlled either from the hypothalamus or the pituitary or the pineal. And the amygdala then responds. Your brain can synapse in 3 different ways. And when you are repeating something, it's going to attach in one of those 3 areas and begin to synapse in one of 3 ways. So we're tapping in and telling the amygdala to synapse properly and positively, body, mind, and spirit.
Beautiful. Amy asks, would Dolores assist the newcomers in this process?
She said, I am and always do. I don't tire of that.
Right.
And she said, remember, no question is dumb. This isn't a process of questioning your questions. If you have a question, ask it about any process. And when you stop questioning, you know that you're dead.
Here's a more basic question. Stacy asks, if emotional alchemy technique doesn't work, is that why we moved to the quantum alchemy? Is that the way it works? Is you start with emotional alchemy and then move on to quantum alchemy if you have to, or what?
A client can basically work through their stuff with the resistance process on their own. That's why she and I created that, just to give away to you, and it's a part of Emotional Alchemy 101. However, the mind tries to get you to believe that you haven't or won't, or that it's not possible, which is why then you create the need for a process.
Us humans.
Yeah. And I asked her that once. I said, why do humans keep needing work when we just did this work and they find other ways to need more work? And she said, well, you like the value of beating the crap out of yourself over and over again in different ways. She said, yes, there's a simple way, but you like the complicated way. So I gave you what you wanted.
Here, Luke is asking a specific question about negative core beliefs. He wants to know, can they be removed by logic alone? I.e., show them how a belief that a 5-year-old them made has dominated their entire life, and in a sense, they're making it up so they can choose to drop it. Basically showing them how absurd the whole thing is and empower them to choose differently.
No. Logic is there, and no matter what your brain would try to get you to believe, the ego would try to get you to believe that knowing something intellectually, that it makes sense or it doesn't, and how it serves you or it doesn't, means that you should keep it or drop it. The ego would try to get you to believe that you should do that so that you have more observation and more focus on exactly that which is blocking you, which is a real tricky, insidious thing. So you don't work with the ego. The ego is like a snake. It kind of snakes in. So we only work with it in a way to calm it down, kind of be compassionate, make the ego feel safe and loved, so that we can evolve in a more deeper level of ourselves. But we will never evolve by understanding intellectually. That is an egoic trick. And it's the best trick that ego can pull out of its magic hat, she said.
And that's what our whole society is based around, is to do everything, solve everything with the mind, and take care of all planning and everything with mind and logic. And that's where we've gotten into trouble.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's still,
if
that were the case, people wouldn't still be creating processes, and she wouldn't have needed to spend 2.5 years working with me to give this to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots more questions coming in, some that are directly going, addressing the work, others that are a little more on the edge. So I'm picking and choosing, everybody, in case you're wondering why. Here's a question to Dolores. How do you help practitioners? Is it a blanket assist or individual attention or both, or what? I like that question.
It is a collective level of assistance. And when you call upon my name, the version of me with whom you most trust and connect comes forth, and I will assist you in the ways that you can understand more easily. So it's individually and collectively.
Here's another Dolores question from Stacy. Dolores, is past life ego problems also coming from a future life, since time is nonlinear?
The future is already what it is. It is already perfect. Your higher self is whole, has always been whole, will always be whole, and there's no reason to be better than or different. It's only the thought processes of the past and how it carries into the now that would make you believe otherwise.
All right. Here's a question from Angela. Would it be beneficial to learn both QHHT and channeling if I was advised that I'm a channel? Both have always interested me. Thanks to Dolores and Pamela. Much love to you both.
You channel every time you open your mouth and every time you don't. To learn to recognize what you're already doing is the more operative suggestion.
Wow, there's lots of questions coming in now. Is there a better place to do a session? Inside versus outside versus by water, etc. What does the place you do your session have to do with the session, if anything?
The place where the client feels most at home, most safe, most grounded, and the place where they will also have less of a chance of distractions. So what she notices a lot, when I'm working with people, I was in the middle of a regression just the other day, and we were almost there, and then the phone rang, and that it takes a lot to induce someone all over again. So you would think that home would be the best place, but it's not always. If you have a landline and you don't unplug it, chances of it ringing are very high. If you have a cell phone and you don't put it on Do Not Disturb, it's going to interrupt you. So home is not always the best place if that is the case.
Here's a question from Indira for Dolores. Which energies are currently transmuted in the collective consciousness of humanity? And what is most important at this time to achieve that unity with other people apart from love?
You're asking me to distinguish something as if it is not. And remember, your future is already relevant. From where I stand, you've transmuted everything. It's simply a matter of realizing that you're already perfect.
Harrietta asks about the recent March full moon equinox to Dolores. Does she have anything to say about that?
Stop associating your memory with the damn moon. Sorry, You're going to look up at the stars and then the damn earth spins and moves. And you're still looking up as if something's going to be the same. Your solar system's changing all the time.
Oh my gosh, I had to go get fresh water for that one. Thank you so much.
She said you've got lunar memory now. Let go. Of course it's beautiful to look at, and so are you. What's more beautiful is in here, not out there. Stop it.
Oh, here's a question from Jackie. Jackie, it's one of the reasons I'm going to pre-answer. It's one of the reasons I created BQH. She asks, if we are already in the process of becoming a QHHT practitioner, is Dolores comfortable with us incorporating quantum alchemy? I feel like quantum alchemy is bridging the gaps I sensed when going through the QHHT training.
She said, if you feel you have gaps, allow anything necessary to bridge them. If you feel that any process that you're working with is not really getting you there, then a change needs to be made, because it's insane to keep doing things the same way if it's not working. Some things about certain processes were not working anymore.
Here's a statement from Humphers who says, I love simple, I need simple, I'm complicated and sometimes need repetition, clear explanations, and patient regard. Today's whole presentation is to give you a kind of a basic overview of quantum alchemy. There are going to be some outlines, some flow charts, a lot of information presented to you. And it'll help you with the presentation of that information with, and then yes, repetition, which I too need. And I've talked to Pamela about that, needing repetition kind of maybe and watching some sessions.
And if you choose to go the whole way and decide to be certified with me as a quantum alchemist practitioner, you get that flow chart. I can't post it on Patreon because it is trademark material and people are simply going to steal it and say that it's theirs. We talked about this today because you're a patron and you get this inside information to help you decide if you want to go further, but I'm not going to give away my process completely either. We're just going to tell you some basics and then you can decide if you like it or not.
Right. Which is also, again, why some of the questions that have been asked, I just sort of skipped over, because those are the questions that you ask when you're more into actually doing this process, right?
Yeah. And the thing about it is, if you go deeper, you want to get certified. You want to sit with me and make sure that you're doing it correctly. If I give you all the processes and then you don't have someone certified to tell you how to use them, when to use them, under what circumstances to use them, this is powerful, sensitive work. It is alchemy. And I am responsible as an alchemist to make sure that you're certified in using the process properly. And if I just give you my entire flow chart and I'm not there to teach you and certify you, that's really irresponsible for me as an alchemist. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, alchemy has been kept a secret for thousands of years because people take the processes and then basically misuse them. And then that can cause a lot of problems in the collective. That can be emotionally dangerous.
Here's a question for Dolores from Lisa. She says, sometimes after working this way, alchemically, is there a tendency to feel tired due to a shift of going back to a denser vibration?
Does she mean for, I wonder if she means for the practitioner or the client, because the clients were definitely tired.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
Yeah, for the client, you're going to feel tired. I tell my clients who are being regressed by me that they need to take the entire day off after a quantum alchemy session, which takes anywhere from an hour minimum to 3 hours maximum, depending upon the resistance levels of your client.
All right. I don't know if this is question for Dolores or not, but interesting, from Mac. Is the collective fixed, or do we add to it by our realizations?
Nothing is ever fixed. And basically the end result is always the same. That end result in this universe is grace, which is why I'm here and I keep talking about grace as a frequency. There are many steps to get to that grace, and many people perceive that they're not close to it or perceive that they're further away, all of which is a misperception. So it's hard for me to answer your question because in a certain way, everything's fixed. And Dolores says that over and over and over again, that everything's already perfect, and that when she crossed over, she realized how perfect humanity really is. But your brain would try to teach you otherwise. Hence why we come to a universe that expands and revolves and kind of goes around itself and believes it's broken again, and then expands even further from that misperception of brokenness.
All right, I'm going to scroll through the chat a little bit. How are you doing, Pamela? You feeling okay?
It's a rough day with this cold, but I'm hanging in there.
All right. We've had a couple questions to Dolores to expand a little bit on this whole idea of sympathing. Dolores, what would you like to say about sympathing?
She said, get back to yourself. You can ask yourself that question when you notice you're doing it. Is this mine? That's a simple question you can ask. You know when it is, you know when it isn't. If it relates to something in your life, at some point that will arise within you, and you will know by asking that question. If you sit there and just let that frequency take over, of course it becomes you, and then it's yours.
Here's one from Natalie. Can we do it all in one session for a client, meaning different blocks of different lives? Or does it?
Normally not.
Yeah.
That is kind of a farcical tale that you can come in and get a whole done in one session, because even though from the higher realm perspective of where she is now, everything's perfect. If she can get you to believe that, you could do it in one session. But the mind would get you to believe otherwise. And that's often the case, that the ego says, I'm still broken. And then you believe it. And everything that follows by I am becomes true in those moments. And then you need more work because you believe that you do.
So actually, Gia says, so from a larger perspective, there is no free will. I don't know if that's a question or a statement.
She says that's correct. Everything that you do, that you're doing right now, you are in a contract to do just that. And you chose it, every single thing.
Even our mistakes.
There's no mistake, she said. Not a single one.
For those of you who may doubt the idea or possibility that Dolores might come and assist you, believe me when I tell you that this humor, she's grounded, she's funny, she's very straightforward. You'll recognize that energy around you if you ask for help, whether it's in Quantum Alchemy, QHHT, or BQH. And the way to start is simply by imagining that's happening. And then pretty soon, there'll be no question. And she's there. You'd have to ask.
Imagination is the tool of the channel. You know, if you can imagine that channeling is like a car and spirit's inside of it. If you basically don't put your foot on the gas pedal and give your imagination permission to move the car, she says, then of course the car sits in the middle of the highway. Right.
Which is why you've been told from the time you were born to stop imagining things, because it takes away your power and then you're more easily controlled.
Yeah, exactly. She said that is the problem in, you know, that the opportunity that you have to work through in your contracts is that particular problem. Mm-hmm. So that's an opportunity when you understand the problem, you understand that that's kind of insane, but you still it takes a lot to break through that program. You've been programmed in that way for fear, and it takes a lot to get out of that.
Yeah. All right, here we have a question for Dr. Emoto.
Mm-hmm.
What role did Dr. Emoto play in the creation of this process? Whoops, the questions just jumped. I think I said it all.
Yeah. He created the water transmutation technique for both Candace and myself, if I'm able to share that information.
Absolutely.
And we share that technique because he created it with us together, and we practiced it on our clients together and got a lot of results together. And once we realized in both of our beta stages that it was working, we added it to both of our processes.
Max says, I really need to see the person when I work with them. Is that necessary? Well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If a person is a client, you're going to need to see them in person or on Zoom. This is not a telephone situation, webinar or in person.
Okay, here's one. Dear Dolores, in terms of evolution of the soul, I keep bouncing back and forth between I made it, I feel grace, I'm at peace, this is it. And boy, I know nothing. All the work is still ahead of me. It's paralyzing at times. Any words of advice? I'll just say that that's happening to many of us.
Moni, okay. I know that's you saying that because I can feel you. What I have to say about that is you're it. You're the it that you're trying to reach. Okay. And when you kind of go, you know what, I know nothing. That's exactly where you should be at all times. And it's very humbling. And you can tell that you're in grace if you're able to say, I know nothing. I mean, this is a part of A Course in Miracles that when I asked Yeshua, because I have a Course in Miracles class coming up next week, I'm like, what's most relevant for humans to know right now? So I did the thing that I always do. And I went through my course and went, there. And I opened my eyes and there it was. And he works that way with me a lot. He just moves my hands, steps on in and does it. So the verse that came up, I believe was in chapter 15. Any ACIM teacher can correct me if I'm wrong. And he said, when you feel that way, when you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed, and when you feel that you're in fear, say this. And this was a complete directive. When you feel that way, say this. And he rarely does that in the whole course. Suggestions, yes, but this was a directive. Say, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing about this. And therefore, I cannot respond to it. And I will not use the past as a reference point to know something now. That is a deprogramming. A Course in Miracles was created to deprogram exactly what Dolores and Candace and I have been talking about, which is that whole fear program, guilt program. So it's okay to not know, is what I'm trying to tell you. If you don't know, you're closer to realization than you believe.
Here's a question and an observation over in the chat by Kareen. I think I'm saying your name right. I noticed when being regressed that I was like an iceberg. There was a lot happening under the surface, but when reviewing the recording, the answers were in one-word answers. That can be typical in some quantum healing sessions. How do we have the client express more so that the practitioner can assist on a deeper level? That's actually where Pamela's process, there's more conversation going on here, and you don't have someone, when you're answering in one-word sessions, one-word answers, and all of that other stuff is going on, you are in deep hypnosis. And please, I think that's where this Quantum Alchemy is brilliant. It's more conversational, right?
Mm-hmm. And then you get to keep asking questions. Yeah, and you can ask questions and let the client answer. You can ask questions on behalf of their higher self, and then switch the roles and then answer for them and then let them answer again. So basically you're switching roles and switching roles and switching roles again and again and again and again and again. And then if they go into resistance, you go through the resistance process, reinduce, and do the same thing. Yep. So Quantum Alchemy is a plethora of tools that get you deeper. And if you're getting where you need to go with those one-word answers, that does not mean you're not regressed. You could be getting exactly what you need to know. And then you go back and listen to your recording and you're like, oh my gosh, I got one word answers. That is because higher self is simple. God is simple. You start getting into these complicated answers, chances are it's the ego answering, not the higher self. It's just that when the ego listens to the higher self and goes, oh, I got nowhere, that's an ego reaction to the higher self's work.
Yeah, answers come in a lot of different ways, sometimes with a lot of words and sometimes with not very many words. You know, it's different.
Yeah. You're all different.
Yeah.
You're not labels on jars. So let's try to trust our answers. It's about how you feel, not what words come out of your mouth or the practitioner's mouth.
Here's a really great question. We get this question a lot for QHHT and BQH in our communities. What do you have to say about regarding children and starseed children? Can we use this process on children? How do we decide if they're old enough or if they're ready for it? Great question, Julia.
Dolores says, I would have said don't do this on children at a certain age at all. I'm going to say at this point, you need to observe clearly the emotional maturity of the child. She says she doesn't advise doing it in below 12 right now. This process and many processes don't do below 12. But you could have a 12-year-old that's more mature than a 30-year-old, and then a 30-year-old that's harder than a 6-year-old. And these are all circumstances that you will familiarize yourself with as a practitioner. Trust yourself.
Here's a question that's coming in from another place. Pamela said that Emoto created the processes. However, water blessings are an ancient practice. Would it be more accurate to say that he shared and taught Pamela and Candace a modern interpretation of ancient practices that are relevant to the now?
Yes, that's some of it. And they are ancient practices.
Yeah, it's true. Mm-hmm. How are you doing now? We're an hour and a half in, Pamela.
I need to close. I need to go feed my children and get them settled down so that I can actually take a nap. I might try to convince the little one to snuggle with me. I've been so sick today and yesterday too. So this was great. And if you guys want to learn more about Beyond Quantum Healing, Candace, where can they find you for your work?
Sure. QuantumHealers.com is the place you find me, other BQH practitioners, and everything you need to know about BQH. Worldwide Regression Week's coming up next month. Pamela will be a part of that. May I say this, though, about Quantum Alchemy? I've been able to step my foot into it. The two sessions that I had and facilitated were memorable and powerful, and I'm really looking forward to getting my feet wet and getting my hands into this a little more deeply with the rest of you. It's very exciting. Thank you, Pamela, for having me, and thank you, Dolores and Emoto.
Yeah, I love Beyond Quantum Healing so much because it gives practitioners a lot of flexibility to utilize their own gifts, to create their own work, to have sort of a basic line, but also to have flexibility in things. And I love that about your work, so that the practitioner can learn how to trust themselves and be open. So that's really, really good. And there's so many different good things about it. So it's been, my goodness, hypnosis has come so far since you have given this process to the world. So please find her. It's also really affordable right now to get trained. Are you still accepting that? Are people still becoming certified?
Oh, sure. Yes. And Pamela has a coupon. You can use Pamela's coupon. Pamela Aaralyn 10 will get you 10% off if you want to take that class. So please remember that, all of you in Pamela's community. And I thank you for your support always, and Dolores's and Emoto's too.
Yeah, Pamela Aaralyn 10, the number is what that code is to get 10% off of to become a Beyond Quantum Healing.
All capital letters too. All capital letters. Pamela Aaralyn, the number 10.
Yeah, so that's good. I love what she's doing. I'm happy that she's sharing it. Happy to support Candace always with this work. It's really beautiful work. If you want to learn more about how to become a practitioner of my process, you can email me and ask any questions that you have. If you know that you're ready, you can go on over and purchase the basic beginning mentorship package, which is just 3 sessions worth of it. I try to train my practitioners in 3 sessions. Doesn't always work out that way. If not, we add on an adjunct session of 1 to 2 more, but normally we get it done in 3. So that's how you become certified, is going into one-on-one mentorship with me. So you can find that at PamelaAaralyn.com. I think that insofar as next week, I haven't posted much on the schedule, but we do have Kripa Yoga 4 coming up on Monday. And then on YouTube, we have the interview with Carol Howell, who will be my facilitator as I do a clear conduit channeling of Yeshua. And she and a couple other master teachers have put together a list of questions, and we'll also be taking your questions, about things that really confuse you regarding ACIM, because it has its own language and terminology, of course, in miracles. So I thought I'd bring in a master teacher. She's wonderful. She was a co-scribe there with Bill Thetford, when back in the 50s when this book came out, and a lot has changed since then. So maybe you might have some questions about what Yeshua says about that channeling now. So I look forward to seeing you live on YouTube for that. And Patreon members will get their own exclusive Zoom link. Only Patreon members will get that link. So I will be posting that for all tier levels, tier 1 and up, so that you can be a part of it. And she will be answering your questions from there, not from YouTube. There will be too many questions from YouTube. So only Patreon members will get their questions answered. And she also will only answer them live. So we're not making a post like we normally do where you put questions in the comments. She will answer them live if you show up. She's a fabulous teacher. You will love her energy. And if you want a refresher on it, I do have an interview of her on YouTube right now. So I'll see you guys next week. I love you. Thank you, Candace.
Thank you, Pamela, and everybody else. Love you. Thank you, Dolores.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.